Hello, Kinesiology 1018. Welcome to our week 3 video lecture on cardiorespiratory endurance. This is also chapter 3 in your textbook. We're going to go through the cardiorespiratory system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, how they interplay, and we'll talk about how to train to improve our cardiovascular health, and we'll talk about why cardiovascular health is extremely important for our long-term physical wellness as a whole. It will start off with the cardiorespiratory system, which is the system that circulates blood throughout our body. So this makes up our heart, our blood vessels, and then interplays with our respiratory system, because that's where that transfer of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs. And then when we go through our cardiovascular system, we have two different circulating systems. We have our pulmonary and our systemic circulation system. The pulmonary system, pulmonary for lungs, systemic for the entire body. Okay, so blood moves from the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen to remove carbon dioxide, returns to the heart, and then is pumped throughout the entire body, then pumped back to the heart and goes through those two cycles. Okay. Our pulmonary circulation is controlled by the right side of the heart, and our systemic by the left side of the heart. Okay. So we're transferring blood from heart, which is kind of our motor or pump, to the lungs to get rid of carbon dioxide, take on the oxygen that we breathed in. That blood then circulates back to the heart. We beat again and send that oxygenated blood throughout the entire body. And then after it's gone through our muscles, our tissues, our organs, it is sent back to the heart to go through this cycle again. Okay. So when we move that blood, that deoxygenated or oxygen poor, this blood has very little oxygen because it's been sent throughout the entire body, goes to our lungs, and that carbon dioxide that we've picked up throughout our body is taken and released into the lungs through diffusion, and oxygen moves in to our bloodstream through diffusion because there is a difference in the amount of oxygen within our lungs compared to our bloodstream. And there's more oxygen in our lungs than in our bloodstream at this time, so oxygen moves in. Okay, there's also more carbon dioxide in our blood than in the air that we're breathing in. So carbon dioxide shifts and moves into the lungs to be expired, to be breathed out. Okay, the pressure at which we are able to pump this blood to our systemic or to our pulmonary system is called our blood pressure. We'll go into more detail into blood pressure going further, but if you've ever gone and taken your blood pressure or had a doctor do it, they say you have two numbers, one over another. Okay, that top number, that first number is systole, or the contraction pressure, and the bottom number is diastole, the relaxation pressure. So how much pressure is going on when our heart contracts, and then how much pressure is going on in our arteries when our heart is relaxed in between heartbeats. Okay. When our heart beats, it sends blood out through arteries. So arteries take blood away from the heart. Okay, veins bring blood back to the heart. Okay, so don't think of them as oxygen and no oxygen. Think of them as away and back to. Okay, so we have arteries that go to our lungs that send deoxygenated blood to our lungs, and then veins that take oxygenated blood back to our heart. We also have arteries that send oxygenated blood throughout the body, and veins that remove or bring back that deoxygenated blood back to the heart to be sent back to the lungs. And this cycles through lungs, body, with every single heartbeat. Okay, so our right side of our heart is sending that deoxygenated blood to the heart, or from the heart to the lungs. Then our left side is pumping all of that oxygenated blood back to the body. Okay, and this all plays together with our respiratory system, or our lungs. So how we take air in, okay, through our nose and through our mouth, how it goes down through our bronchioles, down into our lungs, and then all the way down into our alveolar sacs, which is where that diffusion happens. So we breathe in the air from outside, which has oxygen, carbon dioxide, and a few other molecules. And then that oxygen is transferred into the blood through diffusion, and carbon dioxide is transferred back into the lungs from blood to the lungs through that same diffusion process. and we cycle through again. Okay, so we're constantly changing how many oxygen, how many carbon dioxide molecules we are sending out and coming back in through the lungs. That's the key here with the lungs, is to bring in oxygen to our body and to get rid of carbon dioxide. We'll talk about why oxygen is important and why carbon dioxide is important a little bit later. Okay, and our heart pumps this blood, or beats, okay, all those heart contractions, that lub dub, that thump thump. Okay, that heartbeat should be somewhere between 50 to 90 beats per minute on average. Okay, the lower your heart rate when you're at rest, often the healthier the individual, or the better functioning heart, because every contraction is so forceful that we don't have to have as many contractions. When the heart is, say, out of shape, or it's not functioning well, it has to beat more frequently or more times in order to get the same amount of blood to the entire body. Okay, and the heart beats many more times than we breathe when it comes to kind of over a minute span. You normally take about 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Okay, we want to shoot for lower amount of breaths. That means our respiratory system, we're taking in air very efficiently, and we're having that transition taken for a long period of time with every breath. The more frequently we're taking breaths, okay, that might mean we're stressed, maybe when we're exercised, but we're trying to go and move more air. It's good when we're exercising to breathe more frequently, but when we're at rest, we want to be able to calm our breaths. I recommend just setting a little timer on your watch or on your phone for 1 minute and count how many times you breathe. Okay, if you're breathing closer to that 20 plus times per minute, okay, you may have a problem. If you're maybe stressed, you're anxious, practicing that, taking maybe a minute timer and trying to take as few breaths as possible, nice, slow, under control, can help you relax yourself and bring you back to a more relaxed state. Okay, but this all comes back to also how we transfer our nutrients. Okay, we talked about metabolism as a portion of how we use energy, how we create energy from food in our last section. Our circulatory system also transfers these nutrient-rich molecules like carbohydrates, fats, and proteins throughout our body to our muscles, to our organs, to our brains, so that they can function, they can create their own energy. Okay, the simplest form of energy for us when it comes to these large molecules that we consume comes down to glucose. Glucose is easily circulated in the blood. Okay, blood sugar is blood glucose. It's a molecule, a carbohydrate molecule in its simple form that circulates to our cells and makes it easy for us to break it down to create energy. When we break down glucose, we can create ATP. Okay, ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is our energy currency when it comes to our body. Okay, our body breaks down ATP to release energy, to cause our muscles to contract, to cause our neurons to fire so we can send signals throughout our body. So ATP is what we break down at the smallest sense to create energy within the body. But we need glucose in order to create those ATP. Okay. Glycogen is our stored form of glucose. So our body takes in carbohydrates. So say you eat a potato. Okay, a potato has complex carbohydrates. Our body will digest that potato, break it all the way down into glucose molecules. So it's shrinking those molecules, breaking them down into glucose, which has 6 carbons. Okay, when we want to store that glucose, okay, we don't want it circulating in our blood anymore, we want to hold on to it for later, we can add glucose together, we can put them together and build them into glycogen, which is a more complex form of carbohydrate that we can store within our muscles and then within our liver. So these are our kind of our storage sites for this easy, quick energy source. So it's important for us to consume things like carbohydrates because we can create glucose, we can create energy stores for high intensity activities. So if you're going to go sprint, if you're going to lift weights, if you're going to do something fast, explosive, work really hard, you need stores of glucose and glycogen in order to continue to do that activity. Okay, when we run out of glycogen, we often we bonk. We end up tanking our body, we lose control, we lose the ability to create energy at the rate that we really need it for that activity. Okay, so now let's come back to ATP. Okay, ATP is the energy for cellular processes. So within the cell, within your muscle cells, cells in your organs, cells in your brain, cells in your nervous tissue, okay, we need ATP to create energy within the cell. So it's our smallest form of energy possible. Okay, cells store some, but ATP is a very dense, heavy molecule, so we can't hold too much within our body. So we store a small amount in case we need some reflexive fast actions, but the rest we create or recreate from energy stores like glucose, glycogen, and stored fats. So our body takes these large things that we consume and use it to rebuild ATP so that we don't have to hold on to a bunch of ATP. You're not going to eat ATP, okay? But when we have this ATP, we can break one of those phosphates off. So adenosine triphosphate, so if you look at your image here, P, those are our phosphates. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3. When we break one of them off, it creates a burst of energy. Okay, that burst of energy allows us to contract our muscles, allows us to send signals. Okay, and then when we take our glucose through metabolism, we can reattach those phosphates back onto what was created, or ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So those energy allows us to recycle our explosive ATP. We can do this at different speeds. So sometimes we need it for immediate explosive activities. For these really fast activities like lifting something one time, doing a really short sprint, something really explosive, throwing a ball, kicking a soccer ball, something really, really fast, we don't have enough time to use glucose to create ATP or recreate ATP. Okay, so what we do is we use our stored ATP and we use this molecule called creatine phosphate. Okay, creatine phosphate, you might have heard like the supplement creatine. Creatine phosphate, creatine is a molecule that will hold an extra phosphate and will give it to ADP when it needs it. So say we break down ATP, so now we have a adenosine diphosphate, ADP, and one extra P. Creatine phosphate will take a P and add it onto ADP and grab the other phosphate. So it can keep recycling faster than we can create ATP through normal metabolism. So this is for really fast activities, something around 5 to 15 seconds is normally our range to be able to use this system as our primary energy system for the exercising muscles. So longer than that, we have to use other forms of metabolism to create enough ATP because there's only so much creatine phosphate. Once we go too far, creatine phosphate can't keep up with the demand of energy. So we have to use a slower process that can allow us to have more ATP. And the first step we go to, so after our fast or explosive system, we move to our anaerobic system, anaerobic, A-N-A-E. So without oxygen. Aerobic means like using oxygen. Anaerobic means not using oxygen. Or non-oxidative. We're not using oxygen in this case. Okay. We are taking glucose or glycogen and we are breaking those molecules down. Okay, glucose has 6 carbons. I know I'm getting a little chemistry on you. Okay, but it has 6 carbons. Every time we break one of those carbon bonds, we can release energy and create ATP. Okay, so we'll be able to create a little bit more, but it takes a little bit more time. So that's why if you've ever run on a track or swam, those first 10 seconds you're going fast, and then you just start slowing down. You start slowing down, you start slowing down, you start slowing down. Because your body can't keep up with the amount of energy you need to maintain that speed or maintain that effort. You often feel the burn, okay, or a burning sensation when we are working in this system. Okay, that's because we are building up lactic acid, okay, or we're breaking down glucose, but we don't have oxygen to get rid of hydrogen or get rid of all of the acidity that happens when we break down glucose. So our muscles start to burn because they become more acidic because we've broken those bonds. With the presence of oxygen, though, we can get rid of those acidic molecules, those hydrogen molecules, but it takes more time. Once we have to bring in oxidative or aerobic system or a oxygen-rich system, it takes longer. Okay, so when we have to take in those oxygen, it takes longer, but we can create many more molecules of ATP. So think about this as you're going for maybe a distance run. Maybe you're running for 2 to 10 to an hour and a half. You're running or you're moving for those extended periods of time, or you're just walking around, you're moving slowly. You're going to use your aerobic energy system. Okay. The aerobic energy system can break down glucose, glycogen, and fats to create energy. Okay, so we can create more ATP in total, but it takes more time. So it's a trade-off. We can go very hard, very explosive, but we only have so much time to be within that zone before we have to slow down and recover. Okay. And then the oxidative energy system is the only one that actually occurs within the mitochondria. So you maybe heard that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, only during aerobic energy systems. Okay, or creatine phosphate or anaerobic systems actually happen within the muscle cell. It doesn't have to happen within the mitochondria. Okay, so mitochondria is where we're able to create even more ATP, but we have to have oxygen in order to do so. All right, so that's going to be section 1 or part 1 of our chapter 3 mini lectures. Okay, I'm going to have probably a part 2 and a part 3 for this one. So go back, review your notes on how we created energy and how our circulatory system functions in this case. Okay, so we talked more about the physiology and the chemistry behind our cardiorespiratory system. All right, thank you, and I look forward to our next one.